Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far as Rostermania continues. Some big confirmations coming out last night, especially from Atlanta FaZe officially releasing SlasheR from their roster, and Octane reckons that if their proposed replacement goes through as planned, they will be the scariest team in the CDL going forwards. Which player is he referring to? What does it mean for OpTic and Thieves also trying to build very good teams? Very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. First of all, a couple of other Rostermania confirmations going down. Subliners released Wardy, who is their substitute, and I'm pretty sure he might have been on some sort of deal where I don't know if they really even had an option to extend him here, but regardless, he is officially released. He had a great year last year in challenges. This year wasn't quite so potent in challenges, must be said, but he was a key player mentioned with Beans last year that London could possibly have got. They decided not to. They went down a different direction. Wardy joined Subliners on their bench. Got to play that one game, didn't he, right? There was all the controversy because they put him in for a game just before the World Challenge, just before Major 5 raids, and everyone was like, oh, what's Subliners playing at? Turns out it worked out for them rather well, it's got to be said, over the final two events of the year. But I do think Wardy is definitely a name that was talked about quite a lot in Rostermania conversations last year, and maybe that will be the case again, because fundamentally, despite not having a great challenges year, he was on the Subliners, and they won quite a lot at the end of the year. Okay, maybe a lot of that wasn't down to him, but still interesting nonetheless. Also, this from the Minnesota Rokkr, they are doing clearly like a complete squad wipe basically, because even their academy player Real, he's gone as well. I think that, I don't know if that's how you're meant to pronounce it, people say it different ways, but whatever. He's gone off the roster, which is a little bit surprising because I thought that a player like that, you might want to keep him around. He's actually not one of the rumored players to be joining that Spanish roster over at the Miami Heretics. He wasn't in, well, apparently he's not in the conversations there. We'll see the rumors on that in just a second. So not sure what the future is there, but the likelihood to me is that if this G2 thing comes true, as the rumor says that it will, then they're going to probably from the ground up build again. Whether they would even commit to having an academy in that situation is still a question up in the air as well. So those are a few other Rostermania things going down. There's also this from the Ravens confirming what we knew a couple of days ago, that Asim, Nasty, Scraps, iLLeY, they're all gone, all unrestricted. This is what London do, and of course they're parting ways. Now, it doesn't necessarily rule out the possibility of bringing one or two of these guys back at some point. London will likely take a long time to determine their roster. It's what they always do. They might not even be in London, right? The rumors were going around that they were going to move to Charlotte, North Carolina, which would be interesting just because that's where their players have typically been based. I'm not exactly sure still if that article really was trying to say that they're going to be relocating to Charlotte, as in they're going to be the Charlotte Royal Ravens or something else, or whether they're just going to be based in Charlotte again. Their players, as they used to be for the majority of the CDL, but for this year they were based out of LA for some reason. So don't know what's going on there with London. Of course, they've got this brand new ownership as well, but they will take their sweet time to determine their team, I'm sure, because that's what they always do. Even Crowder mentioned that his contract with FaZe is actually coming to an end in about a week's time when all the player contracts end, and he does say that he is kind of talking a little bit with other organizations, or just intends to. He expects to get extended on FaZe, but right now you can't guarantee it. So he basically says that his contract's in an end, he expects to stay with FaZe, but it's not 100% guaranteed. And one player that won't be with FaZe almost certainly is going to be SlasheR. They confirmed this last night. It took quite some time to confirm this, right? Because this was official on Sunday night, Monday morning. Here we are on Thursday, and only now are we talking about FaZe confirming this. Today we bid farewell to SlasheR, a leader, mentor, record-shattering champion whose name will be forever inscribed in our history. So I think SlasheR fundamentally did a pretty good job this year. He came in, I think he did really what he was meant to do for what they wanted him to do, improve their search and destroy, help them get over the line in the grand finals at Major 2, but fundamentally, I think he's a great player, but it just wasn't a great fit, right? And I think it was the same towards the end of Arcitys' tenure there as well. Their results this year and last year weren't too dissimilar. Okay, yes, they won an event this year. They didn't the previous year. It was at Major 2 in Boston that I was lucky enough to be there for. But I think they realised that this SlasheR Cellium thing, and even it was mentioned plenty of times throughout the year by many players. I think even maybe it was Karma who mentioned it at some point. He was like, I'm not really sure this pacing thing actually works. Now, it must be said, SlasheR still has FaZe in his name. It still has it in his bio, and still has the checkmark verified affiliated with FaZe. I'll just refresh one more time to see if it's gone anywhere, but I'm pretty sure that it hasn't. So yeah, as we can see here, appreciate FaZe for the last year, unrestricted free agent. So I do wonder, as I said yesterday, whether, you know, he's unrestricted, he's exploring offers, and 95% chance he goes to join a different team and hopefully can, you know, be another talisman for a new roster. But still, if the FaZe deal they're trying to do falls through, maybe SlasheR is there as a backup option. So we talked about SlasheR a bit yesterday. say, right, where he could potentially go. I like the idea of that G2 Rokkr squad, if that's what it's going to be, building around SlasheR, because even Sib, and we'll talk about Sib in a second, because I think his season flew under the radar a little bit because he was very strong early on, Sib, but then fell off a bit and was actually particularly inconsistent towards the end of the year. His numbers actually still look pretty good. We'll see him in a second. But I do wonder whether a SlasheR Sib AR combo could be an interesting one for a team to go for if they really want to try and challenge with the top guys, because fundamentally subliners, after building the roster they did after last offseason, most people had them in their 7th, 8th, maybe 6th range best teams. They weren't considered a super team by any stretch, yet they won 3 of the events and they won the World Championship. So it's never a guarantee that the theoretical best squads are actually going to be the best squads if you've got good role players. So this is SlasheR's second tenure now on FaZe. Massive glove, of course, from SlasheR. But it does leave the question, who is going to replace SlasheR on FaZe? Are they going to go for Insight, as we saw yesterday as a rumour going around that they were looking at Insight, or is it going to be another player? Octane, having now retired, gives his thoughts on the matter and basically says that if FaZe get the player they're looking to get, that is the scariest team on paper. He reckons that potentially OpTic and Thieves just behind that. Of course, subliners aren't making any changes, so they're not really in the conversation here. And he reckons that if FaZe don't get the player they want, then probably the OpTic and potentially the Thieves lineup becomes the best ones theoretically. So which player is this that FaZe are targeting, and can they get the move done?
Who's the strongest potential team? That's a good question because I don't have to reveal anything. FaZe. Or, depending on that decision, I would say it's a tie between LAT and OpTic. But I think FaZe. If what is supposed to happen happens. But then again, everything's kind of up in the air right now, so who knows? See, that's a good question because then I can answer it and it's open-ended and you guys don't get to know anything, but you get a little bit. See, that's good. Those are good questions, chat. You guys should take notes right there. I would say FaZe right now on the rumored rosters. I would say FaZe, and then LAT and OpTic are tied, I would say.
So every day that goes by here, I think it's less and less likely that Scrappy is the topic of conversation. It seems to me that by now, if Scrap was available, if Toronto was selling him, then we would have heard more about it. We'd have heard more from rumours and sources that said, look, Scrappy isn't happy. We know that for a fact. I mean, it's been said by many different parties, but it doesn't seem like Toronto are looking to sell him, and you can't blame them necessarily. But we've got X talking about organisation suicide in terms of, if you do this, will any other top star players really want to play for you ever again? Will you be able to attract the top talents? They're making some questionable decisions. But I feel like at this point, if Scrappy was the target, we'd have heard more about it. And I'm pretty sure that he's going to be stuck there. It might change, but that's what it seems like at the moment. So excluding Scrappy as an option, because fundamentally he was never clearly an option. We never knew if he was going to get bought out. And it felt like over the last few days that this whole Rostermania period was getting held up effectively by teams trying to figure out, can they get Scrap, can they not? And they surely have figured that out by now, and someone's given them an answer. So now it leaves the question as to who's the other player holding up this period. And it might well be Drazah or Pret. Those are the two names that I'm thinking about right now. And I don't think that Octane would say what he said in terms of that team being the scariest squad if it was minus SlasheR plus Insight, because Insight's a good player for sure. But if there's, if you're going to swap out Arcitys for SlasheR and it doesn't really work, not because SlasheR isn't a great player, because I think that he is, but because the fits just straight up wasn't working for them, is Insight going to fit better? I'm not sure I see it personally. So I think that Octane would only say this if it was a player that he believes can seriously step up their play, and either that's a flex player like a Drazah, who he actually gives a lot of credit to, right? As Drazah says, 0-5 as they did, was it Major 2 qualifiers, right? To 2 chips in a ring. Gotta tip that, much love, hell of a career. You're gonna pass by me by the time you're done. I'd still chow that though. So, Octane is on the border of being a top 10 player all time. Maybe some would say he is a top 10 player all time after the season that he had. But Octane clearly thinks that Drazah is a really special player, because otherwise he probably wouldn't say something like this. So if Drazah is the man that FaZe are looking at, would that be a really scary squad on paper? Yes, it would. I think Drazah would make a lot of sense for them. The only question is that Drazah and FaZe have had a lot of drama over the last couple of years. It really started around about the Vanguard World Championship, the middle fingers getting thrown up. To be fair, it was at the start of that season when Drazah used to smoke grenades. Simp wasn't happy with it. There was all the drama between Drazah and aBeZy after that event. And since then, there's clearly some beef there. Now, can they put that to bed to form a roster they think is going to be a world beater, possibly they can. I wouldn't rule it out. And fundamentally, could you imagine how, like, FaZe already get booed? You imagine how it would be if Drazah joined FaZe? I mean, that'd be the ultimate villain team to some respects. So possibly Octane could be talking about Drazah here, and if he's not, I think he's probably talking about Pred. I think those are the two names, because we've heard Pred linked to obviously all the top teams, FaZe, Thieves, and OpTic at some point or another. It's the same thing with Drazah linked to OpTic and potentially FaZe as well as rumours. And I think it's between those two as to what OpTic or FaZe get through, because I'm not sure, like, this Envoy thing, it's not a guarantee. The players aren't free agents yet for another few days until this Sunday going into Monday morning, so they will still be having conversations with other players. There is time to change their minds. There is time for OpTic to think, you know what, if we don't get Pred, FaZe get Pred, that's a bit of a problem for the rest of the league. So obviously in FaZe's case, you know, what roles they would change around, it's obviously a massive debate on that front, and whether that would even work. And I think Drazah is probably a plug and play safer option than Pred. So it seems to me there's probably a bit of a tug of war going on here between FaZe and OpTic over those couple of players, and FaZe can only get one of them, right, fundamentally, and probably the other one OpTic will look to get, because if FaZe get Drazah and not Pred, you'd think that OpTic need to get Pred rather than letting him go to Thieves, for example. But who knows what the Thieves roster is? It's going to be Kenny plus 3, potentially Insight and CleanX. That was the rumor that they might get bought out from Toronto and go over there. We don't know about that. And then Envoy is very much up in the air as well. So I think this really does depend quite a lot on, well, we'll see over the coming days what the rumors that are emerging are. But if Drazah was to go to FaZe, then OpTic would need another flex player, and possibly Sib is a name that's been going around. It was actually mentioned even during last season, right? Just get Sib and Pred as a package deal. But at the end of the season, Sib actually wasn't quite so impressive, especially in the search and destroys, and he was really quite inconsistent. He gets a 91 overall because he has high kills, high damage, but I feel like that slightly overrates the impact of the season he had. But fundamentally, he still had a good year, especially at the start of the year, Sib. And yes, maybe he can't bring all the things that a Drazah could bring to the team, or even a Ghosty brought to OpTic Texas, but he might be one of the better options if Drazah is potentially lost to FaZe, as an example. And as Crone and Jacob L say in the replies here, flying under the radar this Rostermania, hardly anyone fans are talking about him. Doesn't matter if the fans are talking, that's why I specified fan. Just basically implies that the teams are doing a lot of talking about Sib and where he might potentially go on potentially a pretty high-end roster. So very much intrigued to your perspective in the comments. Do wonder as well, I thought this is kind of funny, that look, of course, OpTic, SlasheR and Dashy for back in the OGLA days, Drazah is there as well, would be, TJ bringing him back to the mix. Of course, it was 5v5 back then. They had JCap around, and they had Chino around, and Goonjar was around, and all this type of crazy stuff they had going on back then. But this is the current situation, and there is so much to be determined. But once the FaZe and OpTic rosters fall into place, then the rest of it will likely kick into gear. Very much enjoyed to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.